We're gonna have some fun today. All right, good morning everybody. Some more appliance repair stories. So I've had a number of requests based on the first video I did about funny stories of interesting situations and circumstances I've had on the job. Now, for those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. My name is Matt Shoemaker. Traditionally on my channel I talk about owning a Tesla Model 3. I discuss the EV industry as a whole. I do some interesting electric propulsion projects in my workshop. But also I do appliance repair for a living. And every once in a while I'll throw in a video about my job and just funny things that I've encountered. And this is video number 2 in funny stories. So I'm going to start with where it all began. I was raised in the industry. My father did appliance repair starting, I believe it was probably the early 70s, late 60s to early 70s, working for Sears. He worked for Sears for a few years, I believe, and but eventually got the bug to become self-employed and started a small local company, and then had partners and grew that company and sold, and then started our company. And I was raised in the industry. I was born in '71. All I ever remember my father doing is appliance repair. He's still alive. He's been retired from doing appliance repair for, I don't know, a handful of years now, 4 years maybe, something like that. Lives down in Arizona. And for a number of years I was working in his store and in the town of Wakanda. And yes, just like the movie Wakanda, although it's spelled differently. Anyway, I was working in his store, and I use the word working very loosely. I was quite lazy, but I answered the phones. I was better at answering the phones than actually getting work done on products that customers brought in to be repaired. But there was one day a client called, and my dad was on the phone, and he's like, I don't know about that, and I don't know about that. And eventually he puts the customer on hold, and he looks at me and he says, "You want to run a service call?" Well, I was 21 years old, and so my wife and I had just gotten married, and but I hadn't done any appliance repair work at this point. And so he says, "You want to do a service call? Go to this guy's house." So I was 21, had never done any service work before. Now, I did deliver pizzas as a teenager, so I was comfortable with going to people's houses, knocking on doors and that. Well, this gentleman was way out in the town of, I believe it was Northbrook, which is very far. For those of you that are familiar with the area, you know that it's like a 45-minute drive, I think, from Wakanda. So we don't service Northbrook. Also, he wanted a Sunday service call. We don't do service work on Sundays. So my dad's like, "We don't service Northbrook. We don't go out on Sunday." But this guy was like, I gotta, I really need this done. So my dad says, "Look, I'll send out my son to do this job." So I'd never done a service call before, although I'd been trained. Well, I hadn't been really trained, but I'd been around the guys working on stuff. I had been working on microwaves for years, so I at least had a passing knowledge of what to do. So my dad gave me a brown bag of parts. He said, "Here, these are the parts that you'll potentially need, and just, go do this service call." Okay, fine. So I go to this customer's house, and I know there's a few appliance repairmen that watch my videos. So for those of you that understand appliance repair, this was a belt drive Whirlpool washer with the Kenmore name. So it was a 3-port pump style machine, pumps on the underside, belt driven. And I got into the customer's house, tipped the machine back, and on this 3-port pump, there's 2 large ports that take the water from the tub and feed it into the drain hose. And then there's a third small port for, I believe it's the bleach dispenser hose, and that goes to the side of the pump. Well, there's no clamp. Just by design, that hose just fits onto this third small port on the side of the pump. There's no clamp on that hose. It fits over a long prong, and it fits deeply over that prong, and therefore it just, there's no pressure there. It doesn't come off. Well, his came off. So I tipped the machine back, looked underneath it, and that hose had come off. So I stuck it back on, stood the machine down, slid it back. And now at the time, our service rates, this was 26 years ago or whatever, our service rates were $39.50 for the trip to the house and a minimum of $30 of labor beyond that. So we were $69.50 plus parts minimum. So my dad says to me, he says, I don't care how quick this job goes, you get $69.50 no matter what it needs. He said, you're going out, you're driving further than we drive, you're going out on a Sunday, I don't care how simple it is, it's $69.50 plus parts. He goes, and you can charge whatever you want additional above that if you feel it's necessary. So I'm thinking about it, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll make it $69.50, that's our minimum. So the guy writes me a check for $100. Oh, and my father said, he says, just have the guy write the check to you. He said, I don't want anything, we don't normally do this work, I'll just let you keep it. Okay, fine. So he writes me a check for $100 and hands it to me, and he says, I'm a cardiologist. And he said, for me, he says, I'm $300 an hour for my time. He said, you know what, you did me a favor, you drove, I talked to your father on the phone, and he told me you don't cover my area, you don't go out on a Sunday. He said, I can't take a day off of work. He goes, I'll just buy a new washing machine. But he said, I'm also a conservative person. I don't want to just buy a new washer when I know this can be easily repaired. So he said, you saved me more money than you can really comprehend. He says, so I'm going to pay you $100. So he wrote me a check for $100, handed it to me. He says, you told me that you're newly married. He said, go take your wife out to dinner with the extra $30. And that was really, really cool. And that sort of opened my eyes to what is possible in doing service work. Now, I also had one, this was before I was married. I think I was 18 for this next story. And kind of a similar situation. My father answered the phone, and he said, he goes, no, we don't do that. No, we don't do that. So he put his hand over the phone, and he says, Matt, he said, you want to go to someone's house and fix a garage door and take a look at a window well that's leaking? He said, that's like handyman work. We don't do that kind of thing. I said, sure. I said, I'll go out and take a look at that. So same thing. He said, I don't want any piece of this. It's your job. You can go out and do it. So I drove to this customer's house, and there was a broken wheel on a garage door track, and then she had a window well that was separating. And anyway, so I said, well, I'm gonna have to dig out the window well. It's gonna take some time. I actually have to hand dig it down about 3 feet all the way around, and drill holes and screw the two window well liners together around the edge, and replace the sod, and put a shield over the top. I'm gonna have to put a new wheel in the garage door. It's gonna be a pain. So I quoted her $150, which she jumped at, and I worked about half the day, but I made about, I think I averaged like $30 an hour or something like that, $35 an hour to do that job. And this was something that really got me excited to become self-employed and to do service work for people. Also, I liked the fact that I had to sort of think outside the box. I had to problem solve rapidly in order to take care of this problem. And you know, thankfully, this customer was open-minded, and my father said, I'll send out my teenage son on this. He said he's a teenager, but he's pretty technically inclined. He can figure things out. So, you know, that was pretty cool, and that really started me on the path to doing service work. So those are a couple of just starting stories, but got a couple funny ones coming up now. So this next one, I gone to a local gated community, and this isn't the name of the street, but I have to give you a street name so you'll understand. So a customer called, and we'll call the street Brownstone. Wasn't the name of the street, but it's like, I'm on 69 Brownstone Way. Okay, great, 69 Brownstone Way. So I write the service call. I get to the guard gate. I said, yeah, I'm going to 69 Brownstone. He goes, okay, no problem. Here's your pass. So I get in, and there's 69 Brownstone. So I pull in the driveway, big horseshoe driveway. I go up and knock on the door. Now this was, goodness, 20 years ago, something like that. I go up, knock on the door, and 17, 18-year-old kids at the door, and I said, oh, I'm here for the oven. He goes, oh, great, come on in. So he walks me into the house, a big, huge mansion, million-plus dollar house. Oh, excuse me. A $1 million, big mansion, $1 million house. He takes me through this house, weaving around to the kitchen in the back. So I get into the kitchen, and his parents holler from upstairs, "Who's that?" He goes, "It's the guy for the oven. I let him in. He's in to fix the oven." So the dad starts yelling, "I didn't call anybody!" And so he's like, "I'm getting my shoes on. I've got a gun!" He's yelling at me. The kid's like, "I don't know what to tell you." He goes, "We do actually have a problem with the oven." so I'm making my way around to the door. Well, so the husband comes down. Now he's not holding a gun or anything, but he comes down, and I take my shoes off at the door. It's just something that I do. So my shoes are off, and it's wet outside. So I'm trying to get my shoes on, and he's literally pushing me. "Get the hell out of my house!" He's yelling at me, pushing me. I'm like, your son let me in. I said, I'm at 69 Brownstone. I show him the invoice. Good grief. He goes, "That's 69 Brownstone Drive. We are 69 Brownstone Way. 69 Brownstone Way." He goes, "I'm so sick of getting things delivered here and whatever." And I said, "Well, you're on the corner." So what it is this street, the drive and the way are off of each other, and this guy's house is on the corner, and his horseshoe-shaped driveway goes from the way over to the street, or the drive, or whatever it was, drive to way. And so he goes, he's like, "Brownstone Way 69 is up at the end, or at the cul-de-sac, blah, blah, blah," and he's freaking out. And he's shoving me out the door. At this point now, I'm on the driveway, and we're yelling back and forth. I said, "What is your problem? Your son let me in." I said, "Complain to the post office. Change your address." I'm like, this is nuts. Your house is on both streets. It was insane. Well, now my heart rate's pounding, like this. Good grief, And he's like, "I'm calling the police." I said, "On what? You let me in." It was so nuts. So I ended up calling the police. And I said, "Just so you know, this is what's going on." And she goes, "Okay, thank you." And she goes, "We've actually had calls like this before." I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, my heart's pounding. I'm all nervous. Well, I drive up the road to 69 Brownstone Way, and I knock on the door. This guy's really, really nice. He lets me in, and I tell him the saga. And he goes, "Oh my gosh." He said, "Yeah, this keeps happening." And he says, "I told the person on the phone, make absolutely sure that he's on Brownstone Way." I said, "Well, I was on Brownstone Way, but that house is on the corner, and the driveway is on both streets." He goes, "I know." But he said, "We've had a couple pizza delivery guys that have encountered their anger, and apparently he had, I think, a load of gravel or something that almost got dumped in this guy's yard, or not a load of fertilizer. Anyway, something. He had a truckload of something that the truck starts backing into the yard and starts, tipping the box before the homeowner ran out. And apparently that was the last straw. So now that homeowner is completely livid about people going to the wrong house, and understandably so. I used to run across this kind of thing when I was delivering pizzas also. So, and sorry for the jingling sound. I have a gallon bucket that's halfway full of change on my floor, just out of the shot there, that I'm bringing to the bank to cash in. So anyway, so I apologize for the jingling sound. So that was a pretty funny one, and it's actually relatively common that I'll get to a customer's home, knock on the door, and they'll let me in. I've actually had, I think, 3 or 4 times now occurrences where I knock on a customer's door, tell them I'm here for the washing machine, or I'm here for the dryer, or whatever it is, and they let me in. They take me to the laundry room, and they legitimately have a problem with that appliance, or they have a problem with a different appliance. I've gotten to customers' houses, knock on the door, and I'm at the wrong house, and I'll say, "I'm here for the stove or the fridge or whatever," and they'll say, "No, we called about the dishwasher. Come on in." And I go, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's written down wrong." Go in, fix the dishwasher, they write me a check and leave, get to my car and look, holy cow, I'm at the wrong house. This has happened several times, maybe 3 or 4 times in the 26 years I've been doing this, that I get to the wrong house, but they actually have something broken. I also have it happen periodically. In fact, this happened to me a month and a half, 2 months ago. Get to a customer's home, knock on the door, "I'm here for such and such." "No, we don't, we don't have that problem." "Oh, you're on, East Park. You want West Park," because I'd show them the invoice. That's up the road. And then they go, "Can I have your card? Because we have things break frequently, and we've had problems getting good service people, so I'll give them my card." That type of thing happens periodically. So I don't know if I'm a little bit dyslexic, but I'll knock on the wrong door periodically, so that happens as well. I've had a couple of interesting situations, and now I'm going to bring up a specific nationality. Now, before I do that, please listen to the story all the way through. I'm not a prejudiced person, so just by me bringing up a specific nationality, it's going to be easy for you to assume that I'm being prejudiced, and I'm not. When you hear the whole story, you'll see what I mean by this. So I was new at appliance repair. I was maybe 2 years in at this point, and I go to a customer's home in the town of Vernon Hills. Knock on the door, and it was an Indian family, and which I love their accent, by the way. So anyway, so I knock on the door, and they let me into the home. I was there for a microwave, and one thing about the Indian culture is they love bartering for things, and this is something that I was unaware of at the time. So they let me in. I took my shoes off at the door, which is something I always do, and they took me to the microwave. I checked it and had a bad door switch, and I quoted them $51 to fix it. Our microwaves had lower service rates than normal appliances, and so I quoted him, I think it was $51.50 or something to change this door switch. So he says, no, I'll pay you $48. No, it's $51.50, and he's bartering with me, and again, it's part of the culture. So eventually I was getting all annoyed, and I said, look, it's $1 a minute. $1 a minute for every minute I got to argue with you. I mean, at this point it was, I don't know, 15 minutes of time that this customer was wasting, and I was getting all annoyed. So I said, it's $51.50. That's what it is. I said, and if you argue with me anymore, it's going to go up $1 for every minute we argue. I said, I need to get done and get to my next appointment. Okay, fine. So I do the work, and then same thing. He says, I pay you $48. I said, we agreed on $51. I said, I'll tell you what, it's $60. He goes, I'll pay you the $51.50. So he writes me a check for $51.50. So I leave, and I close the door, and I was all annoyed. And so about a month and a half, 2 months later, I get a service call at the same customer's home. Okay, fine. So I get there. I didn't recognize the name or the address or anything. I get to the home. I'm knocking. Oh, I remember this customer. So they took me upstairs to their dryer, and I thought, I'm going to have to barter with these people. I just know it. Well, we have fixed service rates, but oftentimes I give discounts if I'm really quick. In fact, the last service call that I was on, I gave a discount to the customer because it was a lot quicker than normal. And my established service rates really, when I'm in a house for 2 minutes, whatever. So anyway, the guy takes me upstairs, and I'm like, this is going to be a quick repair. So my normal service rates would be $146, I think, to do that repair, if I remember correctly. And so I thought I would normally take $20 off, but this guy's going to argue with me. So I'm just going to quote him the $146. So he comes upstairs, and I said, it's going to be $146 to fix. He says, you can't do any better than that? I said, no, it's $146. So he goes, okay. And then I felt guilty. I felt guilty because I thought, I marked it up because I was going to have to argue with the guy for 15 or 20 minutes or whatever. Should I discount it? And I thought, no, if I discount it, then he's going to learn that I'm willing to barter, and the next time I get there, it's going to be a big argument. So he paid me the full $146, and I left. And it's an interesting thing. The next time I was at his house, not only did he not barter with me, but he welcomed me in, and they were eating ham sandwiches or something. They were just cold cuts on the table. They were making sandwiches for lunch, and he said, would you like to eat something? I said, sure. So he made me a sandwich and gave me a can of Coke for the road, and paid me in full without asking anything, to lower the bill. And he asked me about my family and that. And here's where it gets interesting. Some cultures are looked down on for whatever reason. I don't know, but that my first experience with this customer, again, he was bartering with me and kind of arguing with me about the bill or whatever. And I started to kind of develop this, my goodness, some cultures are just difficult to deal with. By the time I was there the third time, they were welcoming me in almost as a part of the family. And what I learned about the East Indian culture is that they're very devoted people. They're very family-oriented people. But they're a little bit on the cynical side. They're untrusting of people that they just met. Also, their culture in India is you barter for everything. It's just the way it is. So they get here to the States, and you barter for some things, buying cars or what. I mean, you barter for some things, but you don't barter for in-home service. You don't barter for the price of a loaf of bread at the grocery store. There's just certain things that, our culture is different. So, but once they realize that, and once they've called you several times out to their home, now you are part of their circle, almost like part of their family. So now I've learned to really love doing service work for Indian families, because again, they're very loyal, they're very faithful people. So, and I recognize that the first time I'm there, it's part of their culture. They're probably going to question me more than other cultures might. But once I go through that process with them, it's like an initiation rite, then they're among the best people in the world to have in your life, because again, they're very devoted, they're very faithful people. And so kind of an interesting story. And I love doing service calls at people's homes that are immigrants from other countries. I love it. I'm a talkative person, and I will broach difficult topics. So I get into someone's home, they'll have a heavy accent. It doesn't matter what country they're from, but if they have a heavy accent, oftentimes, I ask them, what appliance am I looking at? And they give me the symptoms. And as I'm disassembling the appliance to service it, I'll ask questions. I'll say, so, how long have you been in the States? Oh, we came over, 8 years ago or whatever. And I'll say, oh, that's great. So what brought you here? Well, it was the education system. I was studying my master's, or it was, I've run across people from Somalia that were refugees. I've run across just, people come over for different reasons. And I love to get these personal stories. Share your story with me. What brought you here? And I ask, do you still have family in your home country? And usually it's yes, their parents. That's typically what I hear. My aging parents are there. I have a brother and sister that are there. And, okay, great. Do you get back to visit them often? Well, we try, but it's expensive, airfare. We're trying to move them here. And people that have emigrated to the States they're very open. I've yet to find an immigrant that has not been open with me about why they came, and I absolutely love those personal stories, and I think to a degree it endears me to them, as long as I'm not too invasive into their lives. So that's always a lot of fun. I really enjoy that. So here's another one for you. About again 23 years ago, I went out to a customer's house on a garbage disposal. So, and when the woman called, she was pretty adamant. She said, I just had a brand new sink installed. It was a $1,400 sink, and this was 20 some years ago. So what would that be? A $2,500 or $3,000 sink at this point? Real high-end sink, high-end home. She said, I want to make absolutely sure that my sink doesn't get scratched or damaged in any way. So, we assured her, ma'am, we'll do our best. You can stand there and watch the service tech and make sure that he's being kind to your sink. So, and I had, in bold letters on the invoice, be careful with the sink, don't touch the sink, whatever. So, so I head to this customer's house, and she lets me in, and it seemed relatively friendly on the front end, but she did tell me, she said, now bear in mind, I have this $1,400 sink, it's brand new. And I said, that's fine, ma'am. I said, all the service is done underneath the sink and the cabinet when dealing with the garbage disposal. So she watched me like a hawk, and I opened up the cabinet door and I said, you need a new disposal. And she goes, I don't want to touch the sink. I said, well, the disposal mounts to a sink flange. And she has this polished brass sink flange. It looked like gold in the sink. I said, what I'll do is I will install the same style disposal, so that way it will hang from the original sink flange, the InSinkErator brand sink flange. I said, so I won't have to touch the sink flange or anything. You'll have your nice polished brass sink flange hanging from the sink. So the flange will remain, it's attached to the sink, so I don't have to touch the sink or anything. I unlock the flange from the bottom, put the disposal on, but the sink doesn't get touched. She goes, okay, great. And so she says, okay, fine. So I grab a disposal from my car, and again, she's watching me like a hawk. I do all the work from the underside, put the disposal on, and she goes, okay, great, thanks for not touching the sink. I said, no problem. She pays me, and I leave. Well, then I get a phone call from our office, not 5 minutes later, or less, 2 minutes later. I'm just several blocks away. She called, said, you scratched the sink. I never touched, my hand wasn't ever even anywhere near the sink. She said you scratched it. Oh my gosh. So at this point, I'm annoyed. So I drive back out there, and she goes, there's a scratch in my sink. I said, first off, I didn't touch your sink. I mean, this woman was, at this point, I'd had it. I mean, it was comment after comment after comment after comment from this woman. And she's like, you know, just what a nightmare. So I'm like, I never touched your sink. I had nothing to do with the sink. You watched me. My hand never went in the sink. She goes, there's a scratch. So I look in the sink, and I said, that's not a scratch. So I licked my thumb and wiped it on the inside of the sink. I said, that was a watermark line. So I looked at her and I went, good grief. And on my way out the door, I said, don't ever call us again. I mean, some people are impossible to deal with. I'm like, my hands never went in this woman's sink. I had another situation too, where a customer had accused me of damaging their countertop. So I have toolbox like everyone does. Well, I also always use a foam kneeling pad, just protect my knees, whatever. And when I go to a customer's home, if there's a rug or if it's just a real beat up floor, then fine, I'll set my toolbox on the floor and I'll use the kneeling pad. But if they have a really pretty floor and there's no rug to put my toolbox on, or if I have to set the toolbox on the counter, I will always lay my kneeling pad down and set the toolbox on top of it. And I take my shoes off at the door. I mean, I am hyper ridiculous about not damaging anything in anyone's home. So I get to this customer's home and I put my toolbox up on the counter, and kneeling pad, toolbox. Well, they needed their built-in microwave repaired. So this is not a built-in microwave over the top of a range. It slid into a cavity in the cabinet. And actually the homeowner had already removed all of the trim, so you just had to take the microwave out to work on it. So I had to set it on their counter, and you can already tell where this is going. So I said, do you have a towel or a rug or something that we can, set down on the towel or on the counter? So they grabbed the towel, and I doubled it over, set it on the counter, and set the microwave on top of it. So I took the cover off the microwave and worked on it, repaired it, put the cover back on, and the woman says, my husband will put it back in the counter or in the cabinet for you. I said, okay. Well, when I took it out, and they were ridiculous about, we got to be careful with the counter. Okay, fine. So I had doubled over a towel, put it on the counter, and when I put the microwave down, I even showed the woman, I said, watch, I'm setting it straight down on the towel. That's important. You don't want to scoot it around, because if there's any screws or anything at the bottom of it, I said the towel's there to protect it, but I'm setting it straight down. She goes, okay, fine. So I worked on it and put it back together without moving it, and she said my husband will put it back in. Well, I get a phone call the next day from the customer, just all freaked out. There's a scratch, a big, long, like 18-inch curved scratch on the counter. I said, ma'am, I set that microwave straight down. You watched me. She goes, I know, and I don't know how it happened, but it's there, and it wasn't there before you were there. I'm like, whatever. So I called my insurance company, American Family Insurance. They sent an adjuster out. The adjuster calls me later on. He goes, yeah. He said, what happened? The homeowner put the microwave back in. He grabbed it and slid it, like pivoted at his waist, and slid it across the counter and put it in the cabinet. He said, I could see that the scratch is curved from where the microwave was sitting to aim right at the cabinet. So I even told him, I said, you reinstalled this, right? He said, yep. He says, well, what you did is you slid it across the counter and then put it in. This wasn't our service tech's fault, it's your fault. And then the customer actually admitted to the insurance adjuster that they were going to remodel their kitchen, and I don't know how the adjuster got this out of him, but he admitted they were going to remodel their kitchen, and hey, if they can get a new counter out of the deal. So I've seen that on a number of occasions, insurance fraud, attempts at insurance fraud. So that's always frustrating. Now, I was hired to go out to a customer's home by a warranty company, not a home insurance company, but an extended warranty company, to work on a dishwasher. The door had broken off the hinges. The customer insisted that they didn't, no one fell in the door or anything, that it just fell off. So I was told, look, go out, we're going to condemn this thing, and we're going to deny coverage on it, whatever, because the door doesn't break off on its own. So I went out and checked it, called the insurance company or the warranty company, and I said, no, this is normal wear and tear. This wasn't abuse. They said, how do you know? I said, because the hinge is a flat plate of steel on each side, and it fractured on both sides. And they said, right, somebody fell in the door. I said, first off, if that happened, it would have bent. They crumple and bend. They don't shatter and like break off in a clean break. I said, also, you can see at the clean break, you can see it broke off clean, and if you look at the edge, it was like an inch and a quarter, tall flat plate. About 90% of it was all, where at the break, was all rusted internally, and then at the very bottom of the break, it was shiny, clean metal. I said, those are frequency cracks from opening and closing and opening and closing and opening and closing the door. It work hardens over time, and it was beginning to crack down both sides, and I know that because it was rusted in there. So the crack had been slowly growing until there was just a little bit of metal left at the bottom, and the door couldn't take it anymore, and sheared off each hinge cleanly at that point. So at the crack, you had 90% of the crack where it had cracked off was rusty. The last 10% was shiny metal. And I said, again, that's only going to happen from frequency cracking over an extended period of time. I'm talking a couple of years. That was, each hinge was slowly cracking, and then they broke off. So I said, this is not abuse. Nobody jumped in the door. Nobody slammed the door down. This was normal use, and just whatever, a couple thousand times opening and closing the door, it eventually, they cracked and broke off. And so they said, well, how would you know that? I said, well, mechanical engineering is kind of a thing for me, and I said, I call it appliance forensics. I've gone out on dead appliances for insurance companies, and they want to know, I've seen house fires or floods and that kind of thing, and they go out, they'll hire me to go out and try and ascertain, what caused it. Now, I'm not a fire department investigator, but I can let them know, hey, on this appliance, this is what happened. I can see that the fire, at least that a fire did, initiate on this appliance internally, and here's why. I see that this had shorted or whatever, or I can tell them, no, the fire was external around the appliance and then burnt the appliance, and here's how I know that. But I can't legally testify in court or anything like that. But I am hired by insurance companies on a regular basis to give my assessment, my opinion, and so that's kind of cool. But anyway, I think that's probably enough for today. I've got just any number of more stories, but I don't want the video to get too long. Wow, what is going on there? Anyway, I don't want this video to go too long, so anyway, if you've got any suggestions for future videos, let me know. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up. And my referral code for a new Tesla will be a link in the description below. And yeah, you guys have yourselves a wonderful day. Take it easy now. Bye-bye.